Okay. I think our instructor is available right now. Isaac, please let me know if you can hear me.
Uh, I can hear you. Can you also hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Welcome, Isaac.
Thank
All
you
right.
very much.
So I think we already have people in the chat, about 12 people on YouTube. I think the others are currently, the others are on Twitch. So I believe you can actually kick off already, Isaac.
Sure. Thank you once again for the opportunity.
Isaac, I can barely hear you.
Yeah, I was saying thank you once again for the opportunity.
Oh, all right. Thank you for showing up.
Let me fix my audio issue.
Okay, okay.
Yes, I said.
All right. Okay, so guys, before we kick off with the session, for those of us in the chat, thanks for showing up. Please just go ahead, drop a message. Just drop a message. Tell us where you are joining from. Um, while we're waiting for Isaac to kick off with the session. Okay. All right. So Isaac, once you're ready, just let me know so I
Yeah.
can.
I hope you can hear me clearly now.
Yes, I can hear you clearly now. This is fine.
All right. All right. So I think we can begin.
Okay. Okay. So I'll leave the stage for you. You can proceed. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hello, everyone. So my name is Isaac Anane Amankwa from Accra, Ghana, and I'm going to be an instructor for today. So it's a class. We are learning. Myself, I'm also learning. And so, if you have any question or contribution, don't hesitate to let us know. Yeah. I'll tell you a story of one teacher who unfortunately died. So they were in class, and this teacher, he knew everything. So he was teaching them, and for every illustration, he wants to do himself. So he was doing everything barely by himself, not involving the students. And so one day, the topic for the day was about suicide. And so he was telling the student, "Oh, it is not good to commit suicide. No matter what the case is, it can be resolved." So the teacher wanted to illustrate to them how people commit suicide. And then in the class, he hung a rope and then he tried to hang himself. So unfortunately, he slipped and then he was actually dying. But the student didn't know. They thought the teacher was just illustrating. And so they were just there clapping and the teacher is dying, the teacher is dying. When they realized the teacher was gone. Yeah, as I said, it was unfortunate. But the lesson from that, or what I learned from that story is that as a teacher, you should involve your students so that in case I'm dying, you will save me. So, yeah, that was just by the way. So I'm just trying to let you understand or know that I want you to be involved, and I will make sure I make the class so interactive so that you can also enjoy it. So without wasting much, I hope I'm still audible.
Yes, yes, you are. Yes, you are. Very audible. We can hear you.
All right. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. And can you see my screen?
Yeah. Yeah, we can see your screen. Very clear.
Okay. Okay. So we are kickstarting our journey to backend development, and most people see backend as something scary because you go there and the only thing you see is code, but it is not that scary. I just want us to lay that foundation before we even proceed. So it is not difficult. It is not as people make it seem. And so no matter your background, once you are dedicated to it and you commit time to it and then you have passion for it, you should be successful in this particular path that you decided to toil. So this lesson is actually going to be just an introduction to the backend development. We'll be focusing on the JavaScript language, and then in this lesson, we'll be looking at variables and scope. So that's what we're doing. So we are going to look at the introduction. I think we've done almost all of them. And then we look at the objective for this particular lesson. We look at brief history of JavaScript. Then we look at variables in JavaScript, and then JavaScript scope, how JavaScript handles scope. And then we talk about a brief introduction to Node.js. We just talk about it, what it is, what it can do, why we need it, this kind of thing. And then we install an IDE, maybe VS Code, because I think it's one of the most popular IDEs, and so we're going to install that. And also we might install Node.js because it's a backend development. We are going to install Node.js as well. And then the questions, I put questions last, doesn't mean you can't ask whilst we are on it. So you can go through the right channel and then let your questions available, and I'll be glad to attend to them as well. So without wasting much time, we can continue. So yeah, as I mentioned earlier on, I'm Isaac Amankwa Anane, or Isaac Anane Amankwa. Any way you want to arrange it. Anane is my surname, and so any way you want to arrange it is fine. But I like to be called by my first name, which is Isaac. Any of them I am okay with. And I'm a senior backend engineer here in Accra, Ghana. Yeah. So JavaScript, PHP, C Sharp, Java, and other ones. Yeah. I also happen to do a bit of front end as well, but for full time, I work as a backend engineer, and so that's what we're focusing on. Okay, so that's me, and so with the objectives, I am expecting, or that I'm expecting that by the end of this particular lesson, you should be able to differentiate between front end and back end, and also you should be able to explain how front end interacts with the back end. You should be able to declare variables, and also you should be able to explain the different scopes in JavaScript. Yeah. So that's going to be the objectives for this particular lesson. I'm going to make it beginner friendly as much as I can. If you realize that I'm using big terminologies, kindly prompt me so that I can break them down as well for you. But I'll try my possible best to make sure that I use simple, plain English for you to understand. Okay, so yeah, we are done with the introduction. We are done with the objectives. So yeah, we move to the history. So in early 1995, there was something we call, before then there was a browser called Mosaic. That was, it's either the first or one of the first browsers, Mosaic, and that was the only way that we were able to browse the internet, and it was mostly HTML, CSS with nothing. So if I say that, you know we have when it comes to the web, we have the HTML, which defines the structure for the web page. Okay, it's just the skeleton of the web page. Then we have the CSS, which adds styles, adds beauty to the web page. So when you go to a website and you see the colors, that represents the CSS, the arrangement, the CSS. So you can say position this to the left, position to the right, add a color red to it. That's CSS. Then we have HTML, which defines the structure. So you want to put various elements like the P tag, like the H tag, yeah, that's the structure of it. Then So that was how the web was during the Mosaic era, Mosaic browser era. And then there came in Netscape Navigator, a popular browser then, which was dominating the market then. And it also had the same thing. But along that line, there was something called the browser war, which happened within that particular space of time. That Internet Explorer was coming in, and so Netscape needed something to help them in their competitive advantage over um, Internet Explorer, because Explorer came in with so many features that Netscape didn't have. And so they wanted to add functionalities to their website. Okay, so I mentioned functionalities. And so they contacted Bredan H. And so because of the urgency of the matter, Edge was able to develop JavaScript within 10 days for them. And then they infused or they added JavaScript to the web page. And what JavaScript did was that it adds life, it gives life to the web page. Okay, so when you go to a website and you click, you see it responds to click. When you hover your mouse on something, it responds to that hover. When you want to see animations or things move on your screen, you see them, and that's as a result of JavaScript. Your browser is able to make decisions, and that's as a result of JavaScript. That is the functionality that I'm talking about. And so that is what brought about or birth JavaScript. And along the line, JavaScript, so people were trying to come up with various forms of JavaScript because markets, we all want to get competitive advantage over our competitor. So they came in JavaScript, and then people came up with various forms of JavaScript. So there was this European standards. They sat down. They were like, no, if we leave people to do what they want, we might end up with something that we might not be able to use in future. So they sat down and then they wrote a standard for JavaScript, and that's what. And then they are called the ECMA. I forgot the full name, but it's European something, yeah. But they standardized JavaScript language, and so in other languages like Python, you see we have Python 1. This, Python 3.0, Python 3.1. But in JavaScript, we don't have anything like JavaScript 1 point something JavaScript. We have ECMAScript 6, ECMAScript 5, ECMAScript 7, because that's the standard and that's what JavaScript has to conform to. So if you're developing your own JavaScript, it should conform to that standard before it can be called JavaScript. So yeah, that is how come JavaScript came about. So from this thing, this history that I'm telling you, I'm mentioning a browser because the JavaScript language was built to run in the browser. So the engine that runs JavaScript is built in the browser. So every browser now has JavaScript built in it. Chrome uses an engine called Chromium. Uh, Mozilla uses one called SpiderMonkey. And then recently, Microsoft Edge is moving towards Chromium, but initially it was using Chakra engine. But they all understand JavaScript and they're able to execute JavaScript code. Okay. And so JavaScript was traditionally built to run in the browser. It was recently that someone got the idea to be able to run JavaScript outside of the browser. And that is how come we're able to use JavaScript for backend. I'm running too fast, but I'm sure by the time we get to the next few slides, you'll be able to understand very clearly. So understand that JavaScript was built for the browser, but along the line, as knowledge keeps increasing, people came up with the idea of taking JavaScript out of the browser and running it outside of the browser. So that is a little bit history about JavaScript. So you hear people compare, oh, JavaScript is the brother of Java, but it's fundamentally wrong, because JavaScript is so different from Java in concept, in everything. It's so different from Java. And so we mostly say JavaScript is to Java as carpet is to car. You see the word car in carpet doesn't mean car and carpet has anything in relation. They are two different things altogether. And so is JavaScript and then Java. There are two languages on its own. One is compiled, one is interpreted. And so you can't be comparing those two. They have nothing in common. And then the name JavaScript, and I'm still talking about the history. So, about JavaScript, as I was saying, they wanted to add interactions to JavaScript. And so the name script, when it comes to something like drama, where you have two people playing a role in a drama. One speaks, and maybe after 1 second, you hear another person speak. And so it follows that particular pattern. So a script for a drama and a script for the browser, that is how the name came about, script. And then Java back then was a very um, popular commodity, or a very powerful commodity. Or currently we might say it like blockchain. Everybody is running towards it. That was Java back then. And so they thought it wise to name it after the popular commodity at that time, and then it's a script because it follows that interactivity level, kind of thing. So they combined the name JavaScript. So it has nothing to do with Java language. Yeah. Please, if there is any question, kindly let me know so that I can take it from there. Yeah. So front end, back end. Someone might ask why the difference, or why do we have two ends in this particular thing, or this like programming word. So the word, or the programming word, has evolved to a point where we are able to build two separate systems, one showing just the user interface and one storing the data and also transmitting data. And so the front end basically comprises the user interface, the user experience. So when you go to a website, the text you see there, the arrangement, the layout, the colors, that represents the front end. Okay, you'll be able to fill a form, you click, it reacts to it, it interacts, and then you put in your name, your email, you click sign in, and it takes you to a page. Yes, so the UI you see, the user interface you see, that represents the front end. And mostly, traditionally, we build that with in HTML and CSS, as I mentioned earlier on. But with recent development and then with the introduction of Node.js, we are able to build a whole front end with JavaScript and just CSS. And so, but that is not the focus for this topic. And so you put that aside and then focus on backend. So understand that front end represents the user interface that we see. And then the backend, which we are being introduced to today, represents the part of the system that contains the logic, where the data is stored, where the data is processed and then sent to the front end. And so let's say you log into facebook.com, you see your name shown on top there with your profile and everything. The data is stored somewhere, and when you click on your profile, it sends a request from the front end to the backend server, which the backend system or app, which is also situated somewhere else. They are separate entities, but they can interact through a particular protocol, which we will talk about in subsequent lessons. And so you send a request from your front end to the backend. The backend inspects your request, and once the request is accepted, it will process and then send a response back to the front end, so that the front end can also display the data. And so yeah, they communicate through a common architecture called APIs. Okay, that's advanced. You will get there along the line, but just understand that the front end and the back end interacts through APIs, and then the back end is where our data is processed, stored, and then it's transmitted back and forth to the front end. If there are no questions, I'll proceed. Yeah. So someone might ask, why JavaScript? Why not Java? Why not PHP? Why not Python? And then I would say JavaScript is the world's most popular programming language. I didn't say powerful, I said popular. It is popular because, as I mentioned, of late, you're able to build a complete system, both front end, back end, with just JavaScript. You don't need any other language. Because at first you build with HTML, CSS, and then you need like something like Java to build your backend, so that the backend will feed you data and then you put it in your front end. So JavaScript will fetch the data for you, then you process it and then put it in front of you display the data. But now you're able to do everything, both front end, back end, with just JavaScript. And so people are moving towards JavaScript, and that's why it has been the most popular language for the past, I think, over 5 years now. It has been the most popular language, the Stack Overflow survey. JavaScript is the programming language for the web. Yeah. And so if you want to build a system for the web, then JavaScript will be an ideal choice once you are building for the web, because as during the history I told you that it was built purposely for the web. And so when you're going to the web, then if something was built purposely, that means everything built in there, everything built in there is built in such a way that the browser will understand. So it will be ideal to choose JavaScript. And it's also easy to learn. It is very, very easy to learn compared to other languages. I would say JavaScript is one of the easiest languages, and it has a very smooth learning curve. And so, if you're a beginner and you want to learn, then JavaScript is a good choice for you. There are other reasons, but I think these ones are okay for start. So getting started with what we are going to do today. And so, yes, it is introduction to backend development, but the code doesn't change. It's the same JavaScript. As I said, you can use JavaScript for front end, you can use for backend. And so the syntax doesn't change. Nothing changes when it comes to JavaScript, whether you are building for front end or backend. It just depends on what you are doing. And so with the introduction, we are going to learn plain JavaScript, but our examples and styles will be geared towards backend development. And so I want us to take it from here, understanding variables. When it comes to computers, let me just go back because I mentioned that I'm going to make it very beginner friendly. Let's take it from this point. The computer is an entity on its own. Take the computer as a human being. So if you take a human being, for instance, the human being has bones, okay, skeleton. So in programming, you say, or in web development, we say that is the HTML. Then you have flesh, you have beauty, you have eyes, you have hair. That's your CSS. That's what makes you beautiful or handsome. That's the CSS. And then there is a brain inside you which coordinates your activities. It tells you do this. It takes decisions. That is JavaScript. Okay. So we are going to put the computer on one side. We are going to just oppose that with the human being so that we get a clear picture of whatever that we are doing. The computer is not a magic. Everything that happens within a computer is there and it has meaning to it. And so let's take it from there. So variables. The inside of the computer, there is something called memory. Most of the time we call it RAM. There is a memory inside of the computer, the random access memory. And within that memory, that is where information is stored temporarily. So once you start your computer and you open facebook.com, the data that is being transmitted, they are stored temporarily in the memory. Once you close that particular app, the memory loses track of that particular data that you had earlier on. Okay. So inside of the computer memory, data is being stored. And to store data, we need something to identify the kind of data we store. So think of the memory as a container that stores information or stores data. And within that memory, there are allocations. There are small boxes, small allocations in the memory. So when you want to store data, we say you are creating a variable, you are declaring a variable. And so you declare a variable, then you store your data inside of it. So when you look at the illustration here, the big rectangle here with curved edges, that represents the computer memory. Inside of that, there are containers. In here, we have only two containers, but in ideal computer memory, there are so many containers in there. Okay, so if it's 4 gig RAM, then that means there are 4 gig allocation there. You can store up to 4 gigabytes of data inside of that memory. That is a runtime. If it is 8 gigabytes, that means you can store up to 8 gigabytes of data in the memory of the computer. And that is why if your memory is 4 gig and you try to access or open so many apps on your system, you see it begins to become slow because the memory is getting full and cannot store extra data. Okay, so yes. And so if you are declaring a variable, one, you need a label for the variable. And so that is what we call a name for the variable. We will do the practical side, and then we see how we can declare variables. But let us understand that declaring a variable is just like storing data temporarily in the memory of the computer. That being said, in JavaScript, there are three ways that you can declare a variable. Okay. And that is, so from here we move to scope. But once we understand this part, understanding scope is going to be very easier. So there are three ways that we can declare a variable. That is to say, there are three ways we can store data in the memory of a computer. One is by using something we call a keyword. So in the JavaScript language, there are keywords. Okay, we are going to do the practical side, so don't get confused. So we have something called var. So when you want to declare a variable, when you want to store a variable or a data in the memory of the computer, you declare it by using var. That is one. The second way, or the second alternative to declare a variable, is to use the let keyword. And then the last one is to use the const keyword. When we get to the scope part, we will understand the differences between these three keywords and when and how to use them. So that is with variables. When we get to the practical side, I think it's going to be very clear at that point. But this is just an overview of what JavaScript variables are. So yeah, so when you declare a variable, you put the value inside of a container, and then when you want to access it, so in this case, container one is going to be the label, that is the name of the variable, and then inside of it will be the value. So when we want to access the value, we just need to call the name or the label we give to the variable, and it is going to fetch the data that we need for us. So that is with variables. And then we're going to talk about scope. So the simple way that you can understand scope in JavaScript is to say how variables are accessible or accessed in JavaScript. That is technically what the scope is. So how you are able to access a variable defines the scope of a variable. So the scope is how you can access a variable. As simple as that. And there are three scopes in JavaScript. We have the global scope. That is to say, you can declare a variable globally. That means you can access that variable everywhere. So the scope of that variable is a global scope. It can be accessed everywhere. And then we have a function scope. That is, if a variable can be declared inside of a function. If you are new to JavaScript, you might be confused, but understand a function as a collection of a code which performs a particular task. So if you want to calculate the sum of two numbers, and then that then is a function. You write a function to calculate the sum of a number. Okay. So in there you can declare a variable that is, you can store the sum of those two numbers inside of the memory of the computer and then access it later on. When you declare the sum variable inside of the function, it is scoped to that function. It cannot be accessed outside of that function. We will get to the practical side so that you understand it. And then we have the block scope. In JavaScript, let me just stick to JavaScript. In JavaScript, we say a scope when we open two curly brackets. That is a scope. And so when you declare a variable inside of it, it is scoped to that block of code. It cannot be accessed outside of that block. I am sure some of us are getting, it's like you're speaking abstract things. Don't worry, we will just, I think we are left with just 2 slides and then we'll get into the practical side of it. So these are the 3 scopes in JavaScript. We have the global scope, the function scope, and then the block scope. When JavaScript came at first, everything was global. And so I remember people used to laugh at JavaScript developers. Oh, this language everything is global. You declare one variable and you can access it everywhere. People were making fun of that. But after the introduction of ES6, that is ECMAScript 2015, they introduced the let and const keyword. So initially, there was only one way to declare variable, that was with var. And once you declare that, it's scoped to the globe. It's part of the global scope. And then if you declare it inside of a function, it's scoped to that function. But after 2015, when the new standards came, they introduced 2 new keywords, that's the let and then the const, so that you're able to declare variables that will scoped to a particular block. So yeah, so you can declare a variable outside and then it becomes global inside of a function, it becomes scoped to that function, or within a block, it becomes scoped to that block. Yeah. And so I mentioned that if you want to do backend development, then you don't need a browser. We need a browser one because the browser contains an engine to execute the. So when you type your JavaScript code, you need something that would translate that code into a form that the computer will understand. And that engine that would translate your code into the machine code or the code that the machine will be able to process is inside the browser. And that is why JavaScript runs only in the browser. But in 2009, a clever programmer came up with the idea of taking the engine outside of the browser so that you'll be able to run it outside the browser. And after he was successful with that mission, we were able to build backend stuff with JavaScript. That is that saying that we're able to do JavaScript outside of the browser. We don't need JavaScript to run JavaScript. Okay. So he introduced Node.js. So Node.js is not a language. It is just JavaScript. It is a runtime environment. When I say a runtime environment, it provides a space for you to run your JavaScript code, just as the browser would have done. So the browser was providing a runtime. It was providing an environment for the JavaScript code to be run. And then, so outside of the browser, there was nothing like a runtime environment. But Node.js will give you that environment to run it. So it's like the browser, but it is not a browser. So the engine has been taken out of the browser and it's now on your computer. So you'll be able to run it outside of the browser on your computer. So JavaScript, Node.js is not a language. It is not a framework. Let's take note of that. Node.js is not a framework. It is not a library. It is not a language. It is a runtime environment for executing JavaScript code. As simple as that. So we are going to so if you want to continue your backend career, you don't need a browser. You need to install Node.js. And to do that, you have to go to just search for Node.js. The site will come up. Yeah. And then whether you're using Linux or MacBook or Windows, there is a version for you, or there is one for you. It's cross-platform, so you can install on any device that you want. So the current version is 19. The latest one is the recommended for one is 18. So you can install. Mostly, it's ideal to install the LTS because the one with current is still in development. They're testing it, and so it's ideal you go with the long-term support. So you download it from here for your OS and then install. It's just a normal installation process. I have it installed already. So once you click on it, it will start downloading for you. I'll cancel it because I have already installed it. And then you just go through the normal installation process. And once it is done, you have Node.js on your system and you'll be able to execute JavaScript code outside of the browser. We've not touched anything JavaScript yet, and so I will not go ahead and write anything JavaScript. We will start with from the browser and then we will dive directly into outside of the browser with Node.js. So that is with that. So Node.js is a runtime environment. Let's take note of that. Okay. So why would I decide to go with JavaScript as my backend default or base language? Why not Java? Why not Python? Why not PHP? Because PHP is also built for the web. And then I would say that Node.js is highly scalable. One, it is data intensive and is ideal for real-time apps. Node.js, this is a bit advanced, but let me just keep it simple. When we talk about scalability, we are saying that then let's say we are building our system or we are building an app for 5 people to use. Okay. We can build it anyway and then it will still run. And then the more people come on board or try to access our system might tend to be slow because let's say our code is being served on a 4 gigabyte RAM, and then so many people try to access our system at the same time. Because our memory is not large enough to contain all of them, it might become slow. Okay, so we have limited resources in that case. But when you build your system with Node.js, there is something within it called asynchronous that is advanced. I'll keep that, and then during the lesson, I'm sure you'll be taking through that. Node.js has a way of adapting to the large number of users coming on board. So you can have 4 gigabytes memory or RAM, but because Node.js has something called asynchronous programming or architecture, it's able to accept all those users and process the request for all of them without keep making your system slow. That is one advantage of when say it is highly scalable. The more people come on board, it adapts to it, and then it doesn't make your system slow. Let's understand it on that level. There is a deeper explanation to that, but let's understand it on that level. And then it's data intensive. When you're working with or when you're developing a system that's when you're designing a system that involves so much data, because it's ideal we go with Node.js because it's able to process highly data intensive system, and it's also good for real-time apps. Example of a real-time app is a chat messenger. Okay, once you send a message, you want the other party to also respond at that moment. And because of that asynchronous nature or architecture of Node.js, it is able to handle those systems. And so when you're building systems like that, systems that are going to involve so much network access or disk access, when you're going to access your disk, hard disk, most often it's ideal to go with Node.js. I know the explanation I've given, most of them, it's a bit advanced, but don't worry. As you go through the lesson and the other chapters, everything will be so clear to you. Then, how Node.js work? Node.js is ideal for building applications that include a lot of disk or network, as I just mentioned that. And so, when you're going to access your disk most of the time, you can use Node.js. When you are going to build things that are going to access the network most of the time, you can go with Node.js, which is very cool. So, backend development with Node.js is not boring. It can never be boring. It will not be boring. So, if you want to go that way, I'll tell you you're on the right path and you are welcome on board. Yeah. So yeah, I think that is it for the lecture. I've talked enough. Before we dive into it, I'll allow for questions, then we can proceed. So if there are questions, kindly let us know before we continue. Questions.
All right, guys. If you have any question, drop it in the chat so I can see. There's some questions. Isaac, I will basically pull up the questions and put it on the screen. Okay.
Okay. All right. So we can proceed, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah, yeah.
okay, I think there's a question here. Um, is it the same backend that design mobile app and websites? Okay. Okay. So I would say so when you if you realize there was one in one of the slides, let me share my screen again and I'll show you. Yeah, you can use JavaScript also for mobile apps. let me say that even yeah. But don't forget that I mentioned all right. So let me go back. Okay. Yeah. So in this slide, we had a mobile app here, we had web app here, and we have backend server here or the backend system here. So the backend is not the same as the mobile app. It is not the same as the web app. They are individual items. They are independent items. The mobile app is it's just like the web app, but this is on mobile. It's on your phone, on your tablet. Okay. And then the web app is on the desktop. It's on the laptop. You know, it's just the UI, the user interface, the things you see, the colors, the text, the buttons. There's nothing like functionality. No logic in it. You cannot take decisions. You cannot store data. Okay, so your mobile app on itself cannot store data, but there is a system, a service built somewhere. That's the backend, the logic. So if I sign in, when you put in your password and your email, it goes to a backend server. It collects your email, compare it against a data somewhere in your database, matches it. If it matches, it sends a success message back to the front end, which is either the web app or the mobile app, and then you'll be allowed to see what you're supposed to see. And so, to answer that question, web app, mobile app, and they are not the same as the backend. They are separate entities. The backend contains the data that we transmit. It contains the logic, the functionality for your system, which is the front end, to function as expected. I don't know if I've answered your question. I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah. So the second question is on the screen.
Okay, so it's saying that you said the backend represents the logic. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. So the backend represents the logic. That is where decisions are made. That is where data is being processed. It contains the logic. So when I click on a button and I want to log in, what should happen during the login process? Okay. So when it comes first, I have to check for the email if the email exists. If the email does not exist, that means the person is not putting the right credentials. So send a message back to the front end that the email is wrong. If the email is right, then I have to check the password. If the password is not right, don't, then tell the person that, oh, your password is wrong. If the password is right, then let the person successfully log in. The logic, the functionality of it. Okay. So the next question is saying that can you explain the block scope again? Yeah. So with the block scope, I mentioned that uh, I was not expecting you to understand it fully at that point because it's just slide. Okay. It's uh, it's more of theory. So when we get to the practical side where I'm going to actually write code, I will touch on it again. And so I think, yeah. Okay, so someone is also asking, is Node.js ideal for fintech app development? Okay, so when we are talking about what it can build, I mentioned that if your system is going to involve much of disk access, that if you're going to access most of your apps, your data from the hard disk, it's ideal. If it's going to involve a lot of this network access, then it's ideal. So the fintech app is general. Okay, so it depends on the requirement for that system. Then you will go with Node.js. But in general, I would say it is ideal to build with it. It's not wrong to build with it. And I've built quite a number of apps, fintech apps with Node.js, and it works perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. So you can do that.
Okay, so I think there's a question that is not directly related to the class. Do you want me to pull it up? Someone is asking if they can add Node.js to their CV and how they would do that. Should I pull that question up?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay.
Okay. So if I'm adding Node.js as a skill on CV, what section can I add it? A library or a framework? Okay. So as I said, it's not a library. It is not a framework. It is just a runtime environment. Okay. So what you're going to put on your CV is JavaScript. So if it's a backend developer, you put JavaScript and then you just identify Node.js maybe in brackets. Node.js is not a language. It is purely JavaScript. It is not different. Everything you're going to do in Node.js is JavaScript. So on your CV, you put on it, I'm a JavaScript developer and I use JavaScript for backend development using the Node.js runtime environment. That is it. This is not library, it's not a framework. So it's JavaScript.
Okay, so that's all for now. I think we can proceed.
All right. All right. So I hope you can still see my screen.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So I'm in JS Fidel. Uh, let me just open the browser. Let's take it from this. I think that would be ideal. So
We
I'll
are
go to
seeing,
my.
seeing the slide.
You're seeing a slide.
Yes.
Okay. So let me. Okay. So I'm sharing again. Share screen. All right. Okay. Oh, you can see mine. It's dark
Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can see your screen now. Maybe you can just increase the font size a little bit.
All right.
Okay.
So what we see currently is my dev tools. Okay, that is in my browser. So in Chrome, you just right click anywhere. So you can open a new tab, right click anywhere on the page. Then you, in the options or the drop down that comes, you see inspect. When you click on inspect, you're going to see what I'm seeing. It might not be the same as maybe you see this. Okay. So there are so many tabs here. You see elements, which represent your HTML. You see console. You see sources. Forget about them. You're going to focus on the console. Okay. So I just turn mine to console. I want us to follow. So if you want to follow, we can also do same. You go to your browser, open a new tab, right click and select inspect, and then turn to the console tab. What we are doing now is so you remember during the history I told you that JavaScript engine is in the browser, and so every valid JavaScript code you write should be able to be executed by the browser. That is what we're going to do here. Okay, so I'm going to start from scratch so that we all understand. So the first thing that I would do here, I'm going to write our first JavaScript code. So I'll go with console. Don't mind me. I'll explain what I'm doing here. .log. Then I would say, welcome to universe cohorts. It's cohort 3.0. Okay. Let's put the exclamation here and then I'll end it. I'm going to explain what I'm doing now. And then I'll hit enter. The moment I hit enter, you see a message has been printed on the screen here. Okay. What is happening on the screen is that this console is part of the JavaScript language. Is in there. It's a keyword in there. It's something we call a method, okay, or it's an object. I'm trying hard so not to confuse you now, okay. So think of an object as a real object, like a car. A car is an object. A car has wheels. It has windscreen. It has so many properties. It has colors. Okay. So the console here is an object. Think of it as a car, which also has properties. Okay. And the car also has other things aside the physical look, the properties. It has something we call, it can perform an action. The car can move. You can start a car. You can move it. You can stop a car. Okay. So we call in here, we call it a method. Okay, so think of it as an action. So an object can have properties. It can have methods. Then our real world example, a car. A car can have properties like color. It can have methods like start, move, stop. You know. So think of an object as a car, so that it will be very clear to you. Okay. If that is understood, then the console is an object and it has a method in it called log. What that log method does is that it does something. It performs an action like a car. When you start a car, it does something. When you move a car, it does something. It moves. Okay. The log method also does something. It prints something on the screen for us. That is what the log method does. And the log method is part of the console object. So anytime you want to print something on your screen, not your web browser, in your console, okay, the console is how you see what is happening in your code. So you call console, and then if you want to access a property or an attribute of an object, you use the dot operator. That is why you can see. So that's why you see console.log. So what it means is that you call the console object and you say, hey, console, I know there's a property or a method in you called log. Give it to me. And then it gives you that method. What makes it a method is the brackets that we see. So I'm going to type it again. So first we call the object, that is the console object. And then we use the dot operator to access the properties of it. This time we need a method. So we say dot. Okay. When you do dot, you see a lot of them. There are so many properties. We can see clear, context, count, reset. They are all methods and properties in the console object. But out of that, we need just the log. Okay, log. When you want to call a method, when you want to, mostly we say invoke. Okay, invoke. When you say invoke, it's like you're calling something. We want to invoke it. You do that with your brackets. You open one and then you close it. So we invoke the log method from the console object. Okay, and then in JavaScript, this is called an expression. What we've done, console.log. We invoke the console.log method. It's an expression. To close an expression in English language, you say dot. You put a dot or a period at the end of every statement. Okay, so the statement here is an expression. So if you want to end this expression, you do that with a semicolon. If you don't do that, JavaScript is going to yell at you. So it's like a grammatical error. So here it's called syntax error. Okay. So whenever you are ending an expression or a statement, do that with a semicolon. And then this log, so as I said, this log method prints something on the screen. So anything that you want to print on the screen, put it inside of the brackets. If you put it outside, it is not going to work. It has to be inside of it. And so when we look here, we wanted to see welcome to Top Universe Cohort 3.0. And that is what I placed in my inside of the bracket. So in here, I'm going to change the content. So I'm going to say we are printing, sorry, we're printing on the console. Then I'll say, hooray. Okay. When I press enter, you see it has been printed on the screen for me. Okay. That is with JavaScript, and then how to run code. Okay. So most of the languages they'll tell you, oh, so let's do what most of them do. So console.log, sorry. Let me say hello world. We do that often. We are telling the world that hey, hold on, we are coming. We're also coming. And then I'll terminate the expression or I'll end it and then say enter. Then I say hello world. Hello world, I'm now a developer. Hello world, I'm now a JavaScript developer. So that's basically how to log something on your console. And so now in this, what we just did, we've seen something called an object. We've heard something about method. We've heard something about invoke. We've heard something about the syntax, expression, how to terminate it or how to end it. Before we continue, I want to allow questions so that we can continue because we are going to declare variable now. Then we go to scope so that we can end. Our time is almost up. So questions. Can we proceed? I just need one person to confirm that we can proceed so that we can, if there are no questions. So you can type in the chat, oh, you can continue so that I can continue. Hello, can anyone hear me? Hello, can I continue?
Yeah, you can. You can continue.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So, okay, so that's with console.log. Now we come to variable definition or variable declaration. So I said that when you declare a variable, you are storing data inside the memory of the computer, and it's temporal. The moment you refresh the app, you lose that data. Okay. The only way to keep that data is to store it in a data store like a database, but that is advanced. We've not gotten there. So understand that when you declare a variable, the data is stored temporarily in the memory of the computer. So how do we declare? So I mentioned that there are three ways that you can declare a variable. One is by using the var keyword. Okay, so let's declare a variable. So I would say var, then I'll give space, and I'll give a name, a label for my variable. So I would say var, and then I'll say first name. Okay. I will explain why I'm using this particular syntax. First name is equal to, and then I'll put my name in here. I'll say Isaac, Then I'll end it this way. I hit enter. I don't see anything. I see undefined. Just ignore it. It's something else, so you just ignore it. We don't see anything. But what we've done here, we have created in a container in the memory of our computer, and we've labeled it first name, and the data or the value in there is Isaac. How do I know that it's in there? Then I'll call our friend console.log because we want to print that on the screen. I say console.log, open and close it, terminate it, and then I come in here. Now, as I said, you don't call the value, you just need to call the label you give to the variable, and that is going to give you the data. So I'll say first name. Okay. So you've noticed, I'll explain that one as well. So just hold on. So I'm logging this variable, but I said it's in the memory of the computer. So let's see. I'll just hit enter. And in here, I can see my name printed here without, it's not first name printed, it's Isaac printed. So it is in the memory of the computer. Okay. As I said, once I refresh the app, I will lose track of everything. So let's see. I'll refresh my app. Okay, it's just a browser, so I just refreshed it. Now we declared it. So now let's see if it's still in there. So I'll do console.log, close it, then report it first name. Okay, I'll hit enter, and then we are getting an error saying uncut reference error. First name is not defined. So it's saying reference error. We are trying to reference a container in our memory, and they're saying it is called first name, but the memory does not have anything like that called first name because we have refreshed our app, and so the memory has lost track of that data, so it cannot be found. It is not defined. We have not defined it. But the moment we come down here, we say, oh, sorry, I thought I had declared it. So I'll say first name should be equal to Isaac, or this time let me use my surname. So I would say Anani. I'll hit enter. It's saved now. So I can call my console.log again. I did that by pressing the app key so that I go to the previous command that I've entered. Okay, then I hit enter again. And now I can see Anani. So computer is not yelling at me again because now there is a space in the memory allocated for first name. And so that is how we declare a variable using var. So first you start with the var keyword, the label for your the label goes in here. So it's a label. Bring an equal to sign. The equal to sign is called an assignment operator. You are assigning a value to that label or to that container. So the equal to sign is called an assignment operator. Take note of that. And then the value will come here. The value comes in here, and then you terminate it. Okay. So this is the syntax that you have to follow when you're declaring a variable using the var keyword. Okay. The next one, I mentioned 3 keywords. The next one is let. I can do let last name equal to, then I would say, so my last name, I would say Amankwa. I've already used Anani, so I will not go with that again. It's WAH. Then I'll terminate it and I'll hit enter again. Okay. Then I'll try to access it with console.log. Then I'll do last name. So once I do enter, I see Amankwa. Now we've declared variables with var, with let, and it's working the same way. Okay. We are going to see the difference between these two and then the other one we're going to talk about very soon. So it also has the same approach. If you don't declare it first, you cannot access it. The last keyword we're going to talk about in declaring variables is the const keyword. So you can do a const and say middle name. And I would say, or I would say topic. And then, so the topic we are treating today is introduction to backend development. Okay. Then I'll hit enter. So I can also do console. I want to see it on the screen, so I'll do console.log. I'll terminate it, and then I'll say topic. Once I hit enter, I can see introduction to backend development. So we've seen the three ways that we can declare variables. One, using the var keyword. Two, using the let keyword. And three, using the const keyword. Now, before we talk about the differences between these three keywords, let's talk about the naming conventions. You can there are so many ways you can name your variable. There are some things you can do, there are some things you cannot do, and there is the best practice as a JavaScript developer. So let's look at that. I'll clear it. I'm clearing my console. Let me just do that with this. I can clear everything. Okay. We're going to type everything afresh, so don't worry. I've cleared it, but it's still in memory because I've not refreshed the app. So I can call my variables again. Now, the naming conventions. Your variable names cannot start with numbers. So you cannot do this. Let one topic be equal to, and then you give it something here. Okay. When you do that, you're going to get an error, which is saying invalid or unexpected token. The reason why we are getting this error, so a syntax error, okay, the reason why we're getting that error is because we started naming our variable with a number. It is not allowed in JavaScript. You cannot start a variable name with a number, number one. Number two, let's declare that variable and say, so I'll say another variable, and then that's equal to, I'll close it first and say value here, and I'll press enter. And another error, we cannot start with special characters. When I say special characters, I mean hash, those kind of stuff. Hash, them, special characters like the exclamation sign, plus, minus, they are not allowed. So how can we name our variables? We can name them with either uppercase or lowercase. Okay, but which one is the best practice so that we don't waste our time doing unnecessary stuff? Let's go. So when you want to name your variables, it is ideal, it's the best practice to go with characters. Okay, you can start with a character like with an alphabet and then introduce a number later on. So something like topic 1, and say it's something here. Okay, just close it and then hit. Now we are not getting an error, so we can now log console.log and say topic 1. Okay, hit enter and we get our value. So you can start with a character and then end with a number. A number can come anywhere, but it cannot start. Okay. But as JavaScript developers, the JavaScript community, they've all come together and they have a standard. Okay, it's not compulsory, but it will help you as a JavaScript developer. Okay, so we have something we call the camel case notation. There are so many ways you can name variables. We have the Pascal naming convention. We have the camel case naming convention. Yeah. When I say camel case, if you've noticed my naming convention that I've been using, that's what we call camel case. That is when you say when you have multiple words as the name of your variable, then you can't separate and you cannot have spaces too in your variable names. So it's something like first name. You saw I did like this. First name is equal to Isaac like this. Okay. So you do that. You start with a small letter, but the next word in the name should start with a capital letter. So first name. So if it's like three words combining to make the name of the variable. I'm looking for an example. So it's like another variable name. Okay, this is what we call camel case. It starts with a small letter, but any other word apart from the first word that's part of the variable name should start with a capital letter. That's camel case notation. And that is the widely accepted standard for JavaScript developers, community standard. If you don't use it, nobody will beat you. Okay, but it's this way. Then you can Then the Pascal naming convention also says start every new word with a capital letter. So if it's first name, first name. Okay, that's going to be Isaac. Okay, so this is Pascal naming convention. Other languages like C#, they use Pascal naming convention, but in JavaScript, camel case notation. Okay, so enough of that. Let's so we can now declare variable. We know the syntax for naming our variables. Okay, so we can also do this. First name. It's allowed. Isaac. Okay, it's going to work. But as I said, the best practice. Let's go with the camel case notation, which is widely accepted by most JavaScript developers, and I think we'll be fine. So now back to our variable name in the keywords. So there are three differences between them. So let me clear again. And then I'm going to demonstrate that and then I'll explain. So I'm going to declare another variable, first name, that will say Isaac. Okay. So first name has already been declared. Sorry, let me refresh it so that we are starting from scratch. Okay. So first name is equal to Isaac. First name is equal to Isaac. Then I'll do last name is equal to Nani. Okay. And I'll do const middle name is equal to Mankwa. I'll save that as well. The differences between these three variables is that when you declare a variable using let keyword or var keyword, you can change their values along the line. But when you use const, which is to say constant, you cannot change the value. Let's see. So when I log first name, okay, I'm going to see Isaac. But oh, I'm not called Isaac. Oh, I just changed my name. I just want to I changed my name from Isaac to David. So I will come back and I'll say, I'm not called Isaac again. So call first name. Okay, first name. First name be equal to, then I'll put my new name in there. I'll say David. Then I'll hit enter. Okay. So when I do console.log of first name, I should see David. Okay. Or I can also do let first name be equal to Jacob. I'll just end it and then hit enter. Then when I do console.log of first name, I'll see Jacob. So when we trace it, we started with Isaac, we changed it to David, and now we've changed it to Jacob. We don't have, it's no more Isaac. So when you use the let keyword to declare a variable, you can change the value along the line. Okay. The same applies to the var keyword. So we declared last name with var. So let's log that as well. The console log of last name. So we should have Anane on the console here. Now I want to change my name. So I'll say var last name. So I'm changing the value. Last name is no more Anane. It is Tewia. Okay. And now save. Then I can call log last name again. Then we see Tewia. So we've lost our surname Anane. We don't have it anymore. It's now Tewia. So from what we've explained now, when you use var keyword and let keyword to declare a variable, those variables, the value for those variables can be changed later on. Someone will say, then why do we have two different keywords if they are doing the same thing? The differences between the var and let keyword will come to play when we get to the scope. Okay, that is where there are differences between those two keywords. But up to this point, understand that var and let keyword, the values can be changed along the line. Const is the different one among them. Once you declare a variable with const, the value cannot be changed during the life cycle of the app. What I mean by life cycle is until you rerun the app, the value cannot be changed. We declare the variable with const, that's middle name. Okay, so let's log that. Console.log of middle name. Let's terminate it. Middle name. Okay. Our value is Amankwa. Let's try and change the value. Console.log of, sorry, I'm logging again. Let me. So I'm going to say const middle name. And then instead of Amankwa, I'm going to do give a name. Jack. Then I'll go again. So let me do it this way. I'll call middle name, yeah. Because I've already declared it, I can call the key, that is the name, okay, and then I will assign a different value to it. So now the value in there, what we just did has overriding the one we had earlier on. So now the value in middle name is Jack. So when we do middle name dot equal to killer. Mostly we say we have Jack and Killer when we are watching action movies, so we are doing Jack and Killer. So I'll do middle name is equal to Jack. Now we are getting an error, and the error is saying that assignment to a constant variable. Okay, middle name is a constant, and so when we assign a different value to it, it is not allowed. So when you are working on a project and the value in, you don't want to change the value across the life cycle of the app, then you use a constant. If you're going to change it, then use let or var. So that is with var, let, and const. Any questions before we move to scope? I think that will be the last thing that we will do for today. Scope, variable scope.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just pull them up to the screen now. Okay. All right. Can you see the first one?
Okay. So the question is, this environment, is it for backend? The question is no. And the question is yes. So it is not. Okay. The environment we are working in right now is the browser. We are working in a browser. And what we are doing here, we are learning JavaScript. So someone asked that on the CV, which one should you put in? I said JavaScript. We are going to use the JavaScript language. So if you want to do backend, you need to understand the backend. You need to understand the JavaScript language. So what we are doing now is that we are learning the language, how to write the language. Once we know how to learn it, we just need to switch our environment from browser to Node.js. Then we start writing the same code that we are writing. So the same thing that we are writing in the console here, we will convert that, we just copy that, put it inside of our editor, maybe VS Code, and we install Node.js and run it. And it's going to perform the same task. So backend development is nothing different from this. So what we are doing now is not backend development. It is JavaScript. We are learning JavaScript. Once we are done with that, in the next lessons, you'll be gearing towards backend where you'll be actually be using tools for backend. But understand that what we are doing right now, we are learning the syntax, the syntax for the language that will be used for it. I hope it's clear. The next question is, besides .log, is there any other most used method? Oh yes, a lot of them. So the reason why I have not touched any other method or any other thing apart from console.log is that today's topic is centered on variable namings and then the scope. And because we wanted to see what is happening in the memory of our computer, I introduced you to the console.log, which will print on the screen for us to see what is actually happening in the memory. Okay. But aside the console.log, we have console.log alerts or assets, console.table. You use console.table, then you want to display your data or your information in a table form. You have console.error. That is if you want to display an error. There are a lot of them. So when I do console.log, you see we have asset, clear, context, count, a lot of them, a lot of methods on the console. They have properties, we have constructor. These things, you will learn them along the line. So don't be confused at all. They are all things that you're going to use. There is something called debug, you're going to use most often. Debug is used for debugging. You just understand it that way. You understand them along the line. But I have not touched on any of them because we are not working on them now. Okay. So there are a lot of methods aside that. Next question is saying, must the text be in quotation for it to display? Very brilliant question. So yes, there's another thing which I'm sure you're going to learn in your next section. You're going to learn about data types, and then you'll be exposed to this. It is very clear and it's very simple. The computer understands. I'm just giving you an overview. I'm not talking. So you're going to do that in your next lesson. Okay, data types. There are about 7 or 8 data types in JavaScript. We have number, we have a string, we have an object, we have an array. Don't be confused, don't mind me. Okay, if you are getting confused, forget about what I'm saying. In your next lesson, your instructor is going to make it very, very clear to you. But to answer your question, I just want you to understand that's why I'm going in there. So we have a string. When we say a string, let me just break it down. We have a character like A, like B, like C, like D, up to Z. The computer does not understand those characters. The computer only understands zeros and ones, numbers, zero, and even numbers. The computer doesn't even understand 2. When you input 2, the computer, your engine, that is the work of the engine, the JavaScript engine. The JavaScript engine will convert that 2 into zeros and ones, which is understandable by the computer. Okay. So when we say a character, when you say A is a character, when you combine characters to form a word like Teria, like Anane, like Isaac, it becomes a string. So it's a string of characters. Okay, we've stringified them. I'm using a big word. So when we combine characters to form a word, it becomes a string, and that is a data type in JavaScript. Forget about data type. You understand that? To use a string, you need to put them in double quotation marks. That is a string. If you don't put it in a double quotation, you get an error. Example, let's, I'm just giving it a name string, okay, equal to, then I'll just put anything here. I'll put, this is a string. Notice I didn't put it inside double quote and I'll hit enter. You see, I'm getting an error. Unexpected identifier is, okay, that is an error because the computer does not understand what we have typed. But the moment we wrap it inside of double quotes, it becomes a string, which our engine will understand and convert it into zeros and ones for the computer to understand. You're not getting errors again. So one data type is called string, and they are always in double quotes. So it is necessary you put them in double quotes. But if you want to use a number, maybe you are storing someone's age. Let's age, be equal to 5. Age is a number. It is not a string. It is not a character. And as I said, the computer understands numbers. So when you do this, you're not going to get an error. And this data type is called a number. It's not a string. So I do enter, I don't get an error. And I do console.log of age, I get 5. There is no error. This is also another data type. Forget about it. You learn in your next, you go into details in your next lesson. So we've talked about 2 data types: a string, which is supposed to be in double quotes. We've talked about a number, which is supposed to be a number we know without any quotation. Also note that the moment you put a number in a quotation, it is no more a number. So we can do this: age is equal to 5. It is no more a number. It is now a string. Okay. So anything inside a double quote is a string. If it's a number, it is not in a quote. It is a number. The other data types, I will not touch them because it will get you confused. But understand that there are there are 7 or 8 of them. There are objects, there are arrays, there are booleans. If you want to express true or false in your code, there's something called boolean, but forget about it. You'll understand it. If there is any other question, that part where you change the first name to David, why did you not use var or let? Very good observation. So as I mentioned, the memory of the computer does not recognize anything like first name. You have to create that space in the memory and allocate or assign a value to it. Okay. The moment you assign value to it and it is stored in a memory, that label, that name you give the variable can be accessed. You can call it now because it is in there. So you don't use let or var or const anymore because it has already been declared. The moment you use let or const, you are redeclaring it. So any value you put in there is going to replace or is going to override it. It's going to create another store for that. It's going to create another space for that particular one. It's a new variable. It is not the same as the other one. But when you create it and you call the name of the variable, then you're accessing the same thing. So let me clear my console. And then I'll say let first name equal to Isaac. And I do this. I have stored Isaac in first name. So first name is now in the memory. So if I want to access Isaac, I just do console.log. Okay. Sorry. So you see here too, I don't put it in quotation because first name, the computer recognizes first name because it's in the memory. So if you go there and look for the container with this name and spit the value for me. Okay. If I want to change the value in that container, I just need to call the label, which is first name. And then assign, so this is the assignment to create and assign a new value to it. So Anane, and then I hit enter. Okay, so that's the new value in there. So when I do console.log first name, I have Anane. I hope I have answered you. So this is like you are going to replace the value in there. When you do let, you are redeclaring the variable. It's going to create an extra space. And it will leave. So the other one will still be existing. This one will also be existing, but in different location in the memory. Okay. Can it be in a single quote or must it always be in double quotes? Okay. So it can be in single quotes. It can. But fundamentally, putting it in double quotes is the right way. But when you put it in single quotes, JavaScript will run it for you. You will run into issues when you want to print something like, okay, so I'm going to create a variable, okay? So let's my story equal to, so I'm going to do something. Note, I'm going to use single quotes and then story here. Okay. I didn't get any errors. When I do console or log and I do my story, you get story here. But the problem with single quotes comes in here. Now I want to change the content of my story. So my story is equal to, then I'll bring the single quote again. Okay, so I'll do my friend's, okay, my friend's name is Salma. Okay, Salma is my friend. I'll end it. Then I'll run it. You see, we're getting an error in here. What is happening here is that JavaScript recognizes just this part where you open the first and then close it here. The remaining one, it has not recognized it. It's going to throw an error. So when you want to do something like it, it is ideal you do double quote in here, outside here. And then you put the single one inside of it. So when I print it this time, I get my friend's name is Salma. So you should know when and how to use it, but you can use single quotes. But ideally, go with double quote and be free. Is there any other question?
No, we don't have any other question for now.
All
I
right.
think
So the next thing is going to be very short. The scope, so that we don't waste my time. That will be the last thing that we do, and then we can go. So I mentioned that when we talk about scope, we are talking about how a variable can be accessed, whether it's accessible globally or within a block or within a function. 3 ways you can access a variable. And in the beginning of JavaScript, everything was var. We were declaring variables with var. And when you do that, the variable can be accessed globally. Okay. So to understand that, I'm going to declare a function. A function too is a topic on its own. So I'll touch on it just briefly. I'll not go into details so that we don't get confused. But I'm sure you're going to learn it in your subsequent lessons. So I'm going to say, let me do the beginner way so that you don't get confused. So I'll declare a function. So the function keyword, if you want to declare a function, you do it with a function keyword. And then you give a name to your function. So you say sum two numbers. So the naming convention, I'm using the same as a variable. Okay. Then I'll open and close brackets. I'll not go into detail like that. I don't want to get you confused. Okay. Then I would say, I'll explain whatever that I'm doing now. Then I'll say, let's number 1 go to 5. So if you are following and you are having issues with enter, I go to the next line with shift and then enter. So press shift, hold shift and then press enter to take you to the next line. If you do that without the shift, it will run the code. Okay. But in real world, we don't write code here. In real world, we don't write code in the console. Okay. We're going to do that in an editor like VS Code or Sublime, or any of them, or at all. So number 2 is equal to 10. Okay. And then I would say okay, let results be equal to this is the beginner way. This is the beginner way. I just want you to understand what we're doing. So number 1 plus number 2. Then I'll terminate my expression. And then I would say console.log. I want to see the results. Okay. So I'll put results in here. And then I'm done with my function definition. I'll press enter. Okay. So I just want to see, and then I'll explain everything to you. Sum 2 numbers. I will invoke my function. I'll hit enter. Then I have 15 on my console. Now, what is this guy doing? I mentioned that there's something called function. A function is just a collection of code that are performing the same task. Okay, so we've given a descriptive name. We want to sum 2 numbers. We have 1 number, we have number 2, we have number 3. We've organized them inside of a function. That is it. So the moment we call that function, this same thing is going to repeat. It's going to perform the same task. And one advantage of grouping your code like this is that it makes your code reusable. You don't have to duplicate your code all the time. So let's say without function, we declare this and we sum it. Let's say in another part of our code, we want to sum 2 numbers again. We have to rewrite the code again. But when we have a function, we just need to call the function or invoke it, and it's going to perform that same function for us. We are not dealing functions. So let's end there. When you're declaring a function, you start with a function keyword. You give a name to your function, and JavaScript is the same naming convention, camel case. Then you open and close it. So you remember the log method, okay? So you do that, the same thing here. This is to say it is a function and you can invoke it. So first part is the keyword function. The second part is the name. The third part is you put the open and close curly bracket. There's more to this open and close, but that is beyond the scope of this lesson. So in your subsequent one, you're going to tackle it. Then you open and close curly brackets. That is what we call scope. Okay, scope. The moment you open and close your curly bracket, the content in here is scoped to this function. It is scoped to this function. I'm going to explain everything again. So understand that it's a block. So it's scoped to this block. It's a block. So a block of code is determined by the curly brackets. It's a block of code. So when we invoke this function, it is going to run this block of code. And that is why we are having our results here, 15. So we declare a variable called number 1, another one number 2. We add them with the add operator. Okay, if you want to subtract, we use minus. If you want to multiply, we use asterisk. If you want to divide, we use the backslash. Yeah, basic programming stuff. Yeah, so we have, and then we are logging our results. We want to see the results. Okay, there's more to functions, but that is beyond the scope, so I'm not tackling it. The return and other stuff, the parameters, forget about them. You do that later. Now, back to scope. When we declare a variable like I'll come back to this function and say base number, and I say 10. Okay. When I do this, when you use the var keyword, the variable is accessible everywhere in your code. It is accessible globally. That is the scope of the var keyword. Let's take note of that. And so I'm going to come up with my function again. Okay, this time I'm not going to use number 2. I'm going to say I'm taking away number 2. I want to use base number. Okay, so I'll just copy it. And then I don't have number 2, so I'll just do base number. Let's see if we get the same results. I'll just call the method. And you see we are getting the same results. The only thing we did was we defined our variable outside of the function with the var keyword. And then we used it inside of this block, and we are still getting the results. The reason why it is working is because when you use the var keyword to declare a variable, it is globally accessible. Okay, yes. When the same applies to the let, the same way we've defined the var keyword outside of it. When we use let keyword to declare a variable outside of a function, it is also global. But the difference comes in when we are declaring it inside of that scope. So I'll bring the method again, and then I would say, or before then, let me just clear this. Okay. And then let's try to ask, we've declared a variable here, number 1. Okay. Let's try to access number 1. Let's see what we are going to get. Console.log of number 1. Okay, when we hit enter, we are going to get an error. Number 1 is not defined. What are you telling me? But I defined number 1 here. Oh, yes. That's where scope comes in. When you use the let keyword to declare a variable inside a block, that variable is scoped to that block. It is not accessible outside of that block. So this function block, we define a variable inside of it, and we are trying to access the variable outside of that block. It will not allow you. Okay, that is the difference between the global and the global scope and then the block scope. But what if we do this? And so now we're going to know the difference between the var keyword and the let keyword. So instead of declaring the number 1 with let, I'm going to do that with var. Okay, then I'm in again. Then now let's log number 1 on the console. I'm still getting the same thing. So during the slide, I mentioned something called function scoped. So the variable is scoped to this function. So we have block scope, function scope, and global scope. We've tackled the global scope where it is defined outside of it and is accessible even inside of other functions and blocks. This variable is accessible within a function, and so if it's var, but you still cannot do that. Before I continue, am I making sense with the scope, the global? So now we've understood the global and then function and the block. We're not going to look at the difference between var and let, but before we continue, does anyone have a question? We are almost done. Is there any question?
So I don't think we have any question. Please, if you have any question, go ahead, drop it in the chat so we can round up. I don't think we have any question for now,
All right.
Isaac. All right. Yeah.
Okay. So we start with the function scope and then the yeah. So I think basically that's all. Var
All right.
keyword. Yeah. So the difference between the var keyword and then the let keyword, let me just mention that and then we is that when you use the let keyword, it is scoped to the block within which it was declared. Okay. And then when you use the var keyword, it is accessible even outside of that block. It's accessible outside of that block. This is scoped to the function, not just the block, it's the function. And that is why we're able to access it. So of mostly like currently you check most of the codes, you will not see var keywords often. So I told you that the let and const that was introduced in 2015, that's year 6. After it was introduced, we are all moving away from var keyword to let. Okay, so I mentioned var, but you will not see var most of the time when in your lessons. You're going to see let. Don't get confused. You can still do it with var, but it is advisable to go with let. Just be free and safe. So yeah, I think that is it with our lesson for today. So today we've done a lot. There are a lot more to be done, but we've done a lot. We've looked at JavaScript, the fundamentals of it. We don't understand objects, methods. We at least we know 2 data types: the number and then a string. How to declare variable, how to name a variable. We are able to log them on the console. We are also able to differentiate between the var, let, and const keywords. We are able to declare function using the function keyword. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that is it for today's lesson.
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Isaac. So, Isaac, what would be the best way to reach you? To connect with you on social media.
Okay, so I'm very active on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn should be okay because I'm online. I'm available on LinkedIn. And
Okay.
so you can just Isaac Amankwan and that's my name on LinkedIn. You see my picture there. You can connect always. I'm always available.
All
It's
right. All right, so guys, for those of you listening on YouTube and Twitch, if you want to connect with Isaac, feel free to send him a connection request on LinkedIn. Yeah, that is the best way to reach him. And remember, you have a different session slated for 8 p.m. today. So thank you very much for joining, Isaac. Thank you very much for the class. It was wonderful. I learned a lot of things as well from the session. Thanks for joining. Do have a wonderful day. Till next time.
sure. You too.